Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Welcome. We are in Austin, Texas. Let's go. I love that energy. This is the fifth installment of Adoption, the Making of Me, an oral history of adoptee stories. This is the baby of Sarah Reinhardt and Louise Brown. They've been gathering adoptees and all the folks across the constellation together for 5 years, and it's been absolutely magical to see both how this has grown and how their own show has grown. Adoption, the Making of Me is their podcast featuring stories from across the adoption constellation, but mostly focused on adopted people. And I want to just say a quick personal note. My name is Damon Davis. I'm the host of the Who Am I Really podcast, and thank you. And I'm excited about what I'm seeing in this adoption constellation because the elements of self-expression and exploration are growing in ways that I don't think any one of us could have predicted when we were much younger. We're seeing tens of podcasts, thousands of books, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of social media posts, documentaries, poems being read. I mean, the self-expression is absolutely unreal. And it's exciting to see the ways that adopted people, birth mothers, fathers, everybody across the constellation is starting to talk more and more about what it means to be adopted, what it means to have adoption in your life. And I'm so glad that everybody is here being part of this. Really quickly, just raise your hands, how many folks have never been to a live event like this before with other adoptees and community? That's a lot of folks. I'm so excited for you. I want you to look around. These folks are your family now, right? We're from all walks of life across the United States and from around the world. And so as part of this oral history, we're going to introduce Sarah and Louise. They're going to bring up their guests for a recorded podcast for the Adoption, the Making of Me podcast. Come on up.
Come with us, Virginia.
And we can have our guests. As they're coming up, I'm going to take a privilege real quick to say this is their 5th anniversary of the Adoption, the Making of Me podcast. They started this 5 years ago, this month, this weekend. So round of applause for them.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're very happy you're here. We know it wasn't an easy place to get to, but it's a super special place for me. I used to live here. I have very dear friends. 3 of my closest friends are in this room tonight that live here. My son lives in Texas, so I appreciate you guys making the trip. Damon took my line, which was about our 5-year anniversary. And I have to read through the things that I was going to say. But so 5-year anniversary, our 5th event in person, our 4th live event of doing the podcast.
Yes.
And I want to thank some very special supporters of this weekend event. We couldn't have done this without them. Rebecca Wellington, she's not here, unfortunately. Joanna Bagshaw, who also couldn't be here. And Linda Pivac, who you will meet tonight. And finally, Stephen Groschel for his support. So, thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Sarah. I feel like this is short for me. Thank you, Sarah. I echo everything Sarah said, and I'd love to welcome our guest sitting here with us. Okay, so I'm going to read this because she's accomplished. She's an adoptee, a member of our Adoptee Cafe community, which we love, a friend now. She's joined us at past live podcast events. Okay, and as an adoptee, she's from a blended family. She's building something really meaningful, a queer-centered collaborative practice. Her work goes beyond individual mental health to include advocacy for adoptee rights, partnerships with tribal communities, and serving the LGBTQIA2+ community. I practiced. She is the founder of the Bozeman Identity Counseling Center. And I won't sing Meet Virginia. I pulled it up. Meet Virginia. It's one of my favorite songs. And this is Virginia McQueen. Please welcome her.
Hi, Virginia.
Hi.
So, tell us your story, however you'd like to begin.
Thanks. So I am adopted. And okay. I'm adopted. I'm actually adopted from the state we're in right now. So I was born, relinquished, fostered, and adopted in Texas. And yes, it was within about a year of life, within the first year of life. And I'm not sure how long it took, but it was probably about like 6 months to a year after my adoption that my adopted parents noticed as I was learning to walk and move that I was underutilizing the left side of my body. And they found out that I had cerebral palsy. I have cerebral palsy on the left side of my body. And what's really interesting about that, I start with this only because, like my adopted status, they didn't tell me I had cerebral palsy. I knew I was adopted. But it was treated the same, a very similar way that many adopted people don't feel as comfortable talking to their parents about their adopted status. I felt that way in the conversations about cerebral palsy. So they didn't use the term cerebral palsy. I was told I had muscle weakness. And so I kind of grew up feeling like knowing I was had limitations, not putting the word disabled to it or differently abled. It was yet another thing that I contained and had to grapple with on my own, similar to kind of trying to figure out how I felt about myself in a non-biological family.
Why do you think they did that? It's interesting to me.
I mean, I believe that their words now are and have been that they didn't want to limit me with a label.
Okay.
So did they not get you any help? So they had that information, but was there any help?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in physical therapy, I mean, as long as I can remember. I think I continued that throughout high school and then was kind of on my own with that. It's not a progressive condition. It's a neurological condition, but of course, as we age, our bodies age with us. So it will present differently over time. And it's one of the most common disabilities.
Yeah.
And it presents really differently in a lot of people. So most people don't look at me and think that I have limitations. And it was just sort of another thing that I think I knew something about me was different. I knew something was harder. I knew I found like doing things harder, but I didn't have language for it. And so I kind of begin with my story there because it feels like they went hand in hand as these, I knew something, but I only knew so much of something.
And did you have siblings? I was that part. Are they older, younger? How was that?
So I grew up with an older sister who's biological to my adoptive parents.
Okay. Like me.
Yeah.
And they decided to adopt just because they wanted a second child? Or I'm always curious about what brings someone to adopt someone else's child.
Yes, I mean, shouldn't we all stay curious about that?
Yes.
Yeah, so they were already on lists. They were thinking of adopting because I believe my adoptive mother had been told that she wasn't going to be able to have children. And then lo and behold, my sister came along, my adoptive sister, I don't know, like my sister biological to them came along. And then they got a phone call. I was adopted through Lutheran Social Services, which I know, yeah. And the piece I find interesting about that is that there was this real like disconnect between sort of feeling like there was this older child, at least for me, I'm speaking from my perspective, but it was an older child that was biological to them. And so it really, for me, highlighted the ways that I felt different in my family and how much she was similar to them, and how much like love there's been, and how still with that love, how difficult it really was and still is at times to relate and like keep the relationships feeling what they want us to say, like seamless, right? Fitting in, belonging.
Yeah. When you were growing up with your sister, how did she feel? Like, Because that's really close in age too, right? How,
We were 3 years.
you're 3 years, okay. And do you feel, when you're with her, how did she feel growing up too? Like, have you talked about that? Are you close to her now? I'm curious about their relationship.
We've talked about it, and it changes over time, similar to sort of how I feel about being adopted. It has shifted. I mean, my family was definitely one that at least my adopted father will still say to this day that I don't view you as adopted.
Yeah.
Right? I think we heard something similar in Crystal's documentary last night.
It's kind of like saying I'm colorblind. It's a similar equation of not recognizing
Absolutely.
the other
Yeah, for comfort, right? For their comfort.
Well,
for their comfort.
Yeah.
my father was the same. I forgot you were adopted was his line, and I don't consider you adopted. Well, I am adopted.
Yes.
It's a very interesting, because then you have to buck that to talk and to open it up.
Yeah. So she has said, my sister has said, I think just a few years ago that there's some sort of realization of shock of how little we were curious as a family about how I felt about being adopted and what I was going through. And in that, I really agree with her. There was a real, I think because of the comfort piece, a real lack of curiosity and staying curious about the adopted child and then young adult and adult's experience, and being able to ask questions in a way that would draw any one of us more out so that we could have, I think, a closer relationship in our family systems and I think a closer relationship with ourselves.
Did you fall into any kind of the good adoptee, the rebellious adoptee, any of those roles? Did you have a role?
Let's see, how do I want to put that? I think,
This is on film.
right? I think I would say I was the dissociated adoptee. Yeah.
Okay.
I was
Explain
the
better.
public library adoptee.
Okay. Yeah.
I would go read books for hours and check out. I think I, probably like many other adopted people, I feel like I was grappling and thinking about things, probably honestly, sometimes I think even as a therapist that we may be like even clinically ahead of our peers. Because I just don't think it's normal to be thinking about the things that we are imagining, even if it's developmentally normal in the ways that we're doing it. We are sitting with things like missing people, so similar to death, right? At like 2 to 7. And abstract thinking and getting out of that concrete, supposedly, right? If we're listening to 20th century, like developmental stages we still sort of talk about, we're reaching things past that at 9 to 11. So to think about all the imagining we're doing and all of the play that we're using to sort of be self-contained and to think about things that maybe aren't being asked to be expressed freely. I think dissociation is actually a powerful skill, and I still use it from time to time. It doesn't have to be negative, and neither does the appeasing or pleasing or rebelling. They're all pieces of us, and I think, I don't know, I would like to believe that the adopted self is doing almost all of those at a rate 200 times what maybe, no offense to kept people, but maybe what kept people are doing.
Well, and we had a guest maybe 2 years ago who said we're survivors, right? And you don't think of yourself like that. We think we're just managing life like everybody else. So many of us are lost to suicide. I mean, we know the rates. You could talk about that being in your position. Suicide, addiction, all of the things, right? I was listening to Paul Sunderland again just this morning to kind of get in the mindset of this. And, when he says there is no greater trauma than being taken from your mother for a person, there's no greater trauma. Like the way he says it, you're like, wait, that's me. Like it's a weird, so we just grew up, and especially if you kind of look like your family or it just fits, there's that weird, like, you should be fine. Like, well, you didn't have this problem, but you're not fine. And I think that's a really big, how did.
Yeah, I mean, think I presented as more than fine.
Yes.
Which I believe can be pretty typical for us. But, I think it's really telling, again, one of the reasons I bring in like the differences with my body and being disabled, even when it's more invisible than not, is because I actually I believe I came out of the fog with my disability faster than I did my adoption. It's not that I wasn't thinking about it my whole life, but I think it was safer.
Well, and societally, we are not acknowledged for any of that. So we're told how lucky you are, all the expressions people use. So in a way, coming out of the fog is like deprogramming. That's how I think of it.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying, for sure. And, when I applied to grad school for counseling, for clinical psychology, I wrote about, I guess I should back up. I found out about the fact that I had cerebral palsy and not just muscle weakness or something else happening, like an unknown thing happening with my body by finding documents in one of my AP's house that said, like, here's my medical record, cerebral palsy, hemiplegia, cerebral palsy. And I was like, oh my God, there's a name for this thing. And I think I realized then, like, how much we hold, because I was holding that. This idea, like, when I play sports, I love music, I really wanted to learn how to play an instrument. And I, do anything you can put your mind to, even with this muscle weakness. Well, no, I can't actually, I'm not going to learn to play the guitar. I can have fun and I can find a lot of joy in things, but I think having, identifying information or just identity is so vital, knowing who you are. And I think it goes beyond labels. I think helping someone live their life and feel seen is I would like to believe it's part of parenting. I think it's part of the duty, and it's absolutely 100% the duty of an adoptive parent.
When you found that paperwork, did you confront them?
I did, yeah. I asked my adoptive mom. Yeah, I think I just walked downstairs and was like, oh, okay, so I have cerebral palsy. She's like, yeah. And I was like,
how old were you? 18?
26.
26. That's
that's when I say self-contained, like,
right.
I think that's how much I want to convey in my story, that, like, we can live with things, even knowing, like, obviously I knew that it wasn't just a weakness. I can't do certain things. I can't pick up a cup, like, off a table with my left hand. I can hold this mic because I put it in my hand. I don't have the same nerves and neurological sensation that the average person has, so it's harder for me to feel things. That includes temperature. It's so much more far-reaching. So I wonder what would have happened without that if I would have maybe continued my adoption sort of realizations during that period, instead of going on this big medical journey of doing all my own research and talking to my doctors now that I've named for something, and going to, neurology and, for the first time since I was a child, and didn't really remember or know that I was going to a special doctor, or going to physical therapy was, like, basically my main indicator that, like, okay, I am working on something, I can acknowledge this. But it was really hard. And I have a lot of empathy for my parents, or any parent in general, acknowledging that and, like, living with the fact that your child may have a harder time. I'm not a parent, but I have to believe that would be really difficult. I don't think it excuses, but I do think it's, that's really hard. I don't think parents want to see you as struggling or being different or having a harder life.
It's another step of the lie a little bit, though, because
Absolutely.
here we have, these are two major things in your life. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't,
Just, little things.
right? I wasn't talked to about adoption either. It was very shut down. Like, you don't bring it up really, or your mom cries,
Yeah.
and so you don't. and that's what makes you fiercely loyal later, because it's terrifying to get out of that, right? And then you have medical history, which we all have our, none of us really know until later, if we can know it all. And here you have a real thing that you could have, I just think that's fascinating.
It feels like such a parallel
Yeah,
to me
it-
in my
together.
brain to being inside myself, and knowing something, not having the language, maybe not even really knowing how to search for it myself, and kind of being able to live in the unknown in, I would say, a really full way. And I really love not to discount us as adoptees on that, because I do think that we live very fully, even in a limited space.
So had you started to think about, so you went down the rabbit hole of your medical stuff. So you're saying that kind of waylaid your adoption stuff. Prior to that, were you asking questions to your adopted parents? Did they give you any information? Did you have one of those, regular stories? Your mother loved you so much, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. And I should say my biological mother's in the audience. So I'm so happy she's here.
Yeah. I met her.
But yes, I mean, turns out she does love me. So yay, spoiler. But yes, I did get that message. I got all of the tropes.
Yeah,
I mean, we
yeah.
could list them, but yeah, I got, gift. I got like better life. That this was, my parents weren't particularly religious, so I did not get a lot of the other religious message that can come along
That's
with that.
another thing you have to be programmed.
Right.
I mean, growing up in Texas, I will say, especially during the night, late 80s, 90s through 2000s, I think I still had to deprogram.
Right.
And I wasn't raised religious, but just growing up in Texas and the community and like how religion here can be in certain communities here, it was still a part of my life.
Well, and how adoption's viewed, I'm sure, within that, because that's another, how you're treated in the grocery store, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. You struck something. I was recently with my biological aunt, and I think everyone's programmed. I was with her, and she said, well, I would have had a good life with my mother. I know this now. Because she said, oh, honey, maybe you wouldn't have gone to college or something. This isn't about finance. It's an interesting, what you said, the better life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
Did your parents tell you that, or you kind of thought that, or
I believe it was explicitly said.
it was?
And not just, I think, by my parents, but by everyone, by strangers. I think that's one of the things I think I've heard the most is just, that I'm living the better life. And I think it was one of the pieces that I started addressing first and practicing language around. Because I did a lot of my the continuum of coming out of the fog. I'm kind of a systems thinker. So connecting the dots, like history and the legal system and the way adoption works, I think was a safer entry point for my system, for my brain, than dealing with oh my gosh, there's lots here, and I'm struggling at times, or I feel like this is more important than I always knew it was important, but I'm not sure I was ready to do that yet. And yet I think I was doing it all along. I was looking at this all along. I was extremely imaginative and, similar to a lot of other adoptees, have visceral experiences of looking around the grocery store.
Yeah.
So funny that that comes up, and I don't know what it is about the grocery store. Maybe as children we were able just to sort of look,
Moms, that's
and there's lots of families.
shopping and
Watching them together. I used to watch them.
Absolutely. And being told that going back to the better life, that must have meant that my life would have not been as good. And I sort of struggle with that message on 2 points, because I think I was looking around. It made me believe, especially coming from Texas, there's tropes about what class and socioeconomic status in any state, but especially I think in some of the southern states and in Texas can look like. And so I had absolute stereotypes. I had absolute ideas and imagination about what that life would have or could have looked like. And I really, it was and something that I have been talking more about is that it was not even that like just looking at people's faces and saying like, could I be related to you? Could I be related to you? Are you someone from my biological family? But I also think that there's this creation of much deeper empathy and non-judgment. Not that we can't judge, but I love to judge sometimes.
I was just going to say, do you know me?
But as a
funny.
person, like there's just this, there's also like I can relate to everyone, like every single person, because from such a young age, I was not just looking around at faces saying, do I look like you, to every blue-eyed and blonde or shorter person, because my adopted family didn't look like that. I was also saying like, I can relate to you because I could have your name. I could be with any other group of persons in any other home, on any other block. I could even be in a different state. I could be with biological family. I could be kept. And I could have a different name then. And so I think it just created this, like the imaginary play ended up in my adult life, I think translating directly to becoming a therapist. For me, my career choice was not a product of coming out of the fog, but I kind of say like the decades of life, of being adopted, of identity exploration, even if it was just within, and being able to say like, I can relate to you. How can I look at someone and say, how would I have behaved differently? And I just really I feel to my core like there's a extra piece of non-judgmentalness and in myself that I use.
I feel adoptees in general, I know we've talked about it, are very empathetic. I mean, we can be defensive and get away from me and don't touch me and all those things, but we're highly empathetic people and sensitive. This is part of the reason that we have the suicide rate and all of this, right? So, but I think because we are not with our people and we are looking at struggling, who else is struggling? Animals. How many of us love animals? I mean,
Yeah.
you're onto something with that for sure.
You also speak to the randomness of adoption, right? And Crystal's documentary really highlighted, well, if it's a girl, we'll take it. If it's a boy, we'll take it.
Right.
Kind of like going to the pound, you know. So I understand what you're saying too, but what was your trajectory to then, okay, I'm going to search?
So I thought about searching and had a pretty visceral reaction from specifically my mother and my sister in my adoptive family. And it really, while they may not have meant to cause this, the impact was that I did not search. I didn't even reach out to Lutheran social services for my medical to see any records or folders. And now I know better than I did at 22. Like I likely wasn't going to get very much from that organization.
It shut you down, 22, you just shut down.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big reaction. Like, I was very worried about being replaced, right? And very concerned about my, I think my care and needed for reassurance that like they were still she was still my mom and that this, that this wasn't because of something she did. And it absolutely was none of those things. This was mine. And this, as I sit here today on this stage, like this is my story to tell, and this is like my life to live. And it's really difficult that way, right? Because how could I not hear strain and hear tears and sobbing and feel something?
Guilt.
More than guilt. I mean, devastation. It was already scary enough.
Yeah.
And in some ways, like it worked out because who knows, at 22, was I really, ready? But as a therapist, I help adoptees all the time talk about search and reunion. And we're never really ready. I don't think doing it at 35 made a huge difference, except that we can navigate it at any age. There's no right age to do it. And I think the community that you two have built and the podcast and all the stories you've heard are such a testament to that. But yeah, I thought about it and then didn't go through with that. And then the Lutheran Social Services state contracted in Texas, and they shut down, like the one that I was adopted through. And so when I did kind of revisit that in my like late 20s and early 30s, there was like nowhere really. There's like a different organization you could reach out to talk about records. And so I ended up skipping that whole piece. And I searched online, as many people do.
This is before DNA? Or
no, there was DNA.
There was
I hadn't gotten there yet.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not sure why I did that, but yeah, I searched online and I like tinker with systems, and I really wanted my original birth certificate.
Did you have any information though? So you searched online. Did you have any information, a name, anything?
My adopted father had said my biological mother's name at one point, and I sort of pieced it together, and I did recall that, and that was really upsetting because to my adopted mom, because they hadn't agreed to tell me. Again, I think at this point I was like 20. It was around the same. It was somewhere between 26 and 30.
And your dad let you know some information. Your mom was furious.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, if you wanted to do it together, maybe do it earlier. Maybe give me this information at a younger age, because I didn't know any of those pieces, and it becomes uncomfortable enough to talk about it, so you just stop talking about it. And so I knew her name, so I looked that up, and I found her online. But more than that, I also petitioned Texas court for my, non-certified copy of my original birth certificate. And because I knew her name, I ended up getting it. But it was also a profound experience for me because when it arrived, there was an empty rectangle where my biological father's name would be. And if his name had been on that, I wouldn't have won that with the court because I would not have known all the information on my own original birth certificate.
Were you pretending to be her?
I should have.
I mean, some people do that.
I
they
mean,
do.
do whatever you need to do. I'm not here. Yeah.
We learned a little bit about this last night from John. One of our guests out here is from Texas, but that you have to have both, all the information, like the two parents and then the permission and then a whole nother level of something else that he was talking about. But I was like, wow, jump through the hoops. Nobody really gets this.
No.
So when you got the certificate, then what happened?
It was just, I don't know, there was something really altering for me about seeing an empty rectangle. I think other adoptees have talked about this, but like the ghost, but this was an actual apparition. This was just a ghost. And I kind of couldn't believe that we go through, I petitioned the court, we go through all this stuff and we pay money and then we get an empty rectangle. And so again, I'm glad in some ways because I wouldn't have been able to see it, but it really struck me about how much is kept, how much is sealed, how much we wait and beg and ask or don't ever ask and still don't receive. So,
And other people having our information that they won't, like a social worker or whatever, that won't share with us.
yeah.
It's an injustice.
And and on purpose, right? It's a system designed to modern adoptions, a system designed to do that for us, to replant us and then tell us that the roots are only here in that soil. And even if you don't feel like you can grow and thrive, you need to. You should. You should be grateful for this hydrated soil you have. So it was just profound, like for me. And so it really instigated the rest of my search. I wrote a letter to my first mother for probably about a year. I sat with it and just edited it every few months. I don't know if there's any other adopted people who are like just slow movers. But it honestly was a beautiful practice for me. It was almost like journaling with the same 2 pages over and over. And I ended up with a letter I was really happy with because I had a lot of nuance to convey. And I really wanted that like first contact to represent me and who I am. And I'm hopeful I did that. And yeah, so I sent it certified letter.
Were you near each other? Were you in the same state at this point?
No, I was already in Montana.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was in Bozeman, and she's here in Austin. Yeah. So yeah, I used an address I found online, and
Did you have your name, your original name?
Oh, I didn't use my original name, but
Okay.
because I believe she knew I was like, I believed that she knew my name.
Oh.
And so, but I did put my phone number on there, and she texted me. I mean, I think it was pretty fast. Like, I mean, I think it was within a day or two
And this was how
of
long
receiving.
ago?
This was 4 years.
Okay.
This weekend.
Oh, this week.
Yeah.
And she's here.
Yeah.
Special.
Really special.
And what was that like? So she texted you, you just get on the phone, or did you text for a little bit? What happened with that?
Yeah, so my partner Wes and I were actually on an airplane, headed to go celebrate our anniversary. And I remember like we were, taxiing to the runway, and I was like, oh my God, she texted me. She texted me. Like kind of. I was like, oh my God, do I need to get off and go run or something? Like what do I do right now? Do I just sit with this information right here on this little device? Yeah, so it was powerful. I think everything about search is unhinged and powerful and destroying and incredible.
Yeah.
And I think, again, adoptees holding that, like I've just, even working with adopted clients now, I just see us as like this like kaleidoscope of layers and traits. And we really do embody so much more than I think we even can self-conceptualize. Half the time makes me emotional because it's like, in some ways, there's sort of that split piece of like, no one should have to hold this much. And yet, wow, like look how much we hold and look who we are.
Thank you for saying that for everybody. I think everyone needs to hear that, actually. How did you, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, it made me think about how much we don't know until we know. And then you look back and look at maybe the casualties in your wake from the not knowing, maybe I would have parented differently or I would have been a better partner, anything, that.
Yes, that's right. We talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
So and the casualty of our own wake, what we do to ourselves.
Yeah, that part especially. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could be hard on myself. You said, what kind of like adoptee are you at the beginning? A dissociated, one. I mean, I could be hard on myself about that. But again, maybe it goes along with that. I relate to every single person. I also feel that way about relating to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that I'm not hard on myself, but I do find that there's this piece inside that's always like, these are powers, right? These are skills. Mm-hmm. You might have learned something that maybe you never would have learned otherwise. But again, it's sort of, I approach it the same way I approach it when people talk to me about that. Mm-hmm. You have this life, maybe you wouldn't have gone to school. They love using not everyone, but like some people, unfortunately, use what you've accomplished or what you've 100%. Done in life, like being able, and I know, I did go to grad school. I mean, that is, there is a classism.
You're so lucky.
Old world eugenics, like wrapped all in adoption, but not just adoption, right? Yeah. It's been a really interesting, smaller lens of oppression. And I think specifically for like the three of us, right, to look at something and really then be able to extrapolate and see how systems work beyond our lives. And yeah, so it was just.
Well, it's like knowing we're in a business, we're in a big business. Like once you, Gretchen says, I'm using the words like, we have to, take apart the business. Once you use these words and you come to realize it's mind blowing. It's mind blowing for everybody.
Yeah.
So you get the text.
Yeah.
Oh.
And what do you do?
So I get the text and I respond. And similar to me, she's very careful and like cautious. She wanted to, just make sure that she's like, I assume we're speaking to the right people, but let's just go over some information. And so we kind of did that. And then, right? I was like, you can verify. This is probably a good idea. And so we actually just stayed in touch. I think we did a video call as our first kind of meeting and talked on the phone. And then we kept that going for for a year until we met in person.
How did it feel to you? How did it feel just inside?
All of like being connected with her.
Oh.
Deep, terrifying,
I love it.
warm.
And I don't want to, because it's personal, I don't know about this part of your story, but did you find out about your father?
Yeah, so I mean, I was really grateful. It's the only time I will use this word on the stage. To be just welcomed in by her. It's not all of our experiences, and I don't take it for granted, and I don't pretend that relationships, have guarantees. Yeah. I've never believed that really, so this applies here too. But I do feel safe and welcomed, and so I think that really allowed me to say like, it wasn't, she was my main, like many of us, my biological mother was the first, first mom. I was curious my whole life. And, but I think that allowed me to say like, okay, well, what about the other person? Not that I never thought of him, but it was just a less intense.
Which is quite common. We saw in the film last night, right?
Yeah.
But it is another piece.
Yeah, there's another piece.
Yeah.
And I think I was ready to be like, oh, wow, like I look like that side of my genetics potentially. And I think I also really realized that I didn't realize this until I found out it wasn't. And this is not a regret or a shame for anyone, but I kind of realized I was like, oh, I was kind of hoping to find like siblings. And I don't know if it's the dissociated adoptee, but it had not occurred to me that I actually kind of was a little bit inside somewhere being like, well, what if there's this really big family? Mm-hmm. Like what if there's a lot of people? And I think that would have really overwhelmed me personally, because I can be introverted and like sensitive and overstimulated. But I was like, wow, what am I'm not really disappointed with anything here. And then I was like, what am I sad about? And it was like, oh, there's like not more of you. But what I have is absolutely enough. And I'm really happy with my relationships. So I did a DNA site. My biological father had passed, but I did find that out through learning about a half brother. And he's about just under a year younger than me. And he was born and lived in San Antonio, and then now lives outside of Dallas, which is where I was born. And so we're connected. He's a really wonderful person. We laugh because we're like both part of similar communities, and we both have 3 dogs with our partners, and there's just some silly, most likely coincidences that we take as, similarities.
Yeah.
Well, because we're always searching for some meaning in everything.
Right?
So,
yeah. I'm going to give myself some meaning here.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. But there is meaning. I don't think it's all, it is, you are drawn, like siblings are siblings, have siblings. And so you know more about your father through him.
Yeah, I haven't reached out to anyone in that family, but he was really eager. So he had waited. He has his own story. He's kept his, but like he had waited basically for my DNA on a site to help him. He had matched with family members of our biological father, and for years was kind of, well, we don't know. He never had
Wait, so
children.
he didn't know your father either? Was, okay.
Yeah, so he's kept by his mother, but she didn't tell him who his father was. So in sort of a different way, he also had hidden information.
Yeah.
And I try not to overlook that, because I do think as adoptees, one thing that I'm really passionate about is like expanding our circle, expanding our coalition. I think we might not have consensus, but we do have care.
Yeah.
And I think we care a lot, and we do deserve our safe spaces. And I think we're ready to coalesce. I think we're ready for a larger coalition, and I think that includes more people. So I talked to him about that, about like how he didn't know he had a missing person as well.
Yeah.
And in that way, we were not different. And so we were both searching, and my DNA really, it turned his whole search for his own father into something of meaning, right, for himself, into knowledge. And so he met with a half-sister of our biological dad and shared pictures with me. So I have pictures. And my first mom also had told me his name. So I had double confirmation that this was the person.
Yeah.
And that was a meaningful conversation between me and my mom. But yeah, it's...
So you have a sister out there then?
Oh, no, just,
Oh, it was-
sorry,
he had a
my
sister.
biological's father had a half-sister.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And this will just be like a little asterisk, but it's kind of funny because we're sprinkling a bunch of like missing people. It turns out he had come to Dallas to look for his own father, my biological dad.
Really?
Yeah, he was searching for his father. So he had a full brother who won't speak to me or my half brother, but and then a half sister, and the full brother he was
The uncle.
they weren't raised with their father. And so I think he was searching for him in Dallas. And then I don't really know. I think he found out that he wasn't going to speak to him or something, or just couldn't find him. And so then he moved back to San Antonio, where he was actually from. And that's where he, I guess, also had my half brother. But he didn't know about either of us. We did find that out.
He didn't know. Okay, so he was not like, I don't want these kids. He didn't know.
Yeah.
Oh, and he died. I like what you said, consensus. We have care, not consensus. Tell a little bit about that, and also how you what you do in your practice. I think it's very important for people to hear.
So I mean, maybe care, we can come up with any word we want,
I like
but
that.
I think we care about the injustice, but also seeking justice, seeking legal equality, and advocacy, and knowing ourselves, and being in community, and healing, and struggling together. And I think that's kind of what I mean by care, is that we have these spaces. You guys have built a beautiful one, and it's so important, and I'm really excited because I think there's really an eagerness to look ahead as well. Continue Florence Fisher's ALMA, Adoptee Liberty Movement work, and so many others that have come before, and just continue that work of saying, like, here we are, and coming together to speak about what it's like to grow up and be adopted, a lifelong experience of being adopted. And so I say, consensus, because there's still a lot that I think we're trying to figure out what language we all want to use. And we may never, I don't know if, I think it's important for like legislative efforts per se. I can be helpful in any room to sort of read that and figure out how best to gain allies to our side, to be quite honest. But I don't know if we'll ever really agree on language. And I think, to me, that's beautiful. And that's I think that's okay. Yeah. I think if we want to use first mom, biological mom, birth mom, and I know like Concerned United Birth Parents are talking about language themselves. I went to Untangling Our Roots in Atlanta a few weeks ago, and it was my first time there, and I learned a lot, right? Like people are doing all sorts of different things. But I think sometimes it's like we're telling our stories, and I really want to be a part of the piece of coalition, because I think it's so important to any movement and for any community to start seeing themselves as connected to and a part of all of the other pieces of what I'm kind of terming, and I'm probably not the only one, but like communities who have experienced severance. So I really see myself as someone who was severed from this other life, right? This other identity, from my own information, from parts of myself, from the curiosity of others to be curious about me and my adoption from my perspective, and to really see what that's like. And so I'm really, I don't know, I think that we're headed there already, and there's a lot of people doing that work. And yet I do think for me, it feels something really passionate, really deep into sort of a purpose of really saying like, okay, can we, with our sensitivities, with our safety in groups, become more and more comfortable with what it feels like to maybe show up in a room and not just be an adopted person, but be a person who's experienced severance alongside other communities.
Thank you. That's thank you for your work and for being here and sharing your story and the work that you do.
Yeah, you're helping so many people, and you use the language, for others. People do listen to the non-adopted often more than the adopted, right? And so we may not agree on terms or whatever, but we actually have to have people listen to us. And that's the important piece, is to keep going in these groups and these collaborations, because otherwise we're in a circle, and we have to join things that are uncomfortable and talk about things that are uncomfortable and hear things that might be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you're doing really good work. I mean, we know all the stuff you're doing, so we're, behind the scenes, she joins a lot of stuff. She's out there, so doing it's big stuff.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm really, it's like an honor to work with adopted people now. I've been a mental health therapist, but it really became, and I love what I do. It's like it sounds cliche, but it's so much fun for me. I love it, and it's such an honor to be a part of people's lives, but it's really a special honor to work with other adopted people, and I only started doing that like a handful of years ago now, but it's been special. And I do think we use all of ourselves. I'm a clinician, but I'm also someone who can, I think, hopefully see them for their experience, and that's part of that. Like I relate to every single person without putting my experience onto them, and it's like and I think we do that here in community, and I think that's where all that solidarity and love and just safety comes from. So
Definitely.
Thanks for building that yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Virginia.
Thanks, ladies. You were
And what did we say, Louise?
Another great episode.
Another great episode. See
See you next time.
All right.